There's a fascinating interplay between our biology, our behavior, and what many call destiny. Today, I want to explore a powerful question through both a spiritual and scientific lens. How does God introduce you to your soulmate? Now, I want to be clear. Whether you refer to this as divine timing, neurochemical attraction, or spiritual alignment, there are mechanisms at work that draw us toward the people we are meant to meet. And what's even more compelling is that many of these mechanisms are not random. They're shaped by our values, our healing, our growth, and yes, by divine orchestration. In today's talk, we'll explore how our minds and hearts are wired to recognize the right person, not just by chance, but through a sacred process that involves preparation, positioning, and purpose. You'll walk away with practical insight and deep encouragement that your soulmate is not just someone to be found, but someone God is already guiding you toward. Divine timing aligns with neurological readiness in ways that are both profound and deeply practical. While many people wait for the perfect moment or the ideal partner to show up, what's often overlooked is the biological and spiritual transformation that must occur within us before we can truly receive and recognize the person destined to walk alongside us. In neuroscience, we understand that readiness is not merely a state of waiting. It's an active, dynamic condition involving neuroplasticity, emotional regulation, and an internal environment that supports healthy attachment and recognition. When God introduces us to our soulmate, it is not a random event, but a culmination of both spiritual timing and neurobiological preparedness. From a biological perspective, the brain is constantly rewiring itself based on experience, belief systems, and emotional healing. If you've been through trauma, heartbreak, or unhealthy patterns, your nervous system becomes conditioned to respond defensively, sometimes even mistaking chaos for chemistry. Divine timing in this context often means that God waits until your brain and body are in a place where you can see love clearly, not through the lens of fear or unmet needs, but through alignment, peace, and clarity. Until that rewiring happens, even the right person may feel wrong, simply because your system hasn't yet calibrated to healthy love. Think of the reticular activating system, RAS, a bundle of nerves at the base of the brain that filters what we pay attention to. When your values shift, when your faith deepens, when your emotional maturity expands, the RAS begins to spotlight different people and experiences than it did before. That's part of why timing matters. The person who may not have caught your attention 5 years ago suddenly stands out because you are no longer searching for external validation, but looking for resonance, purpose, and safety. God works with this internal filter. When the RAS is tuned by prayer, reflection, healing, and growth, it becomes a divine compass, guiding you toward who matters and away from distractions disguised as destiny. God doesn't just bring people into your life, He brings them at the right stage of your development. This is crucial because love that arrives too early can collapse under the weight of immaturity, and love that arrives too late can wither in the presence of unresolved grief. Neurologically, the prefrontal cortex, which governs decision-making, long-term planning, and impulse control, continues developing into your mid-20s and beyond. If your brain is still dominated by reactive patterns or scarcity-based thinking, the ability to nurture a lasting partnership is compromised. Divine timing considers not only where you are spiritually, but also where you are neurologically. God is patient not because He's slow, but because He honors the complexity of your design. Attachment theory also plays a role here. Secure attachment, a state where you feel safe, connected, and confident in a relationship, requires both partners to have done internal work. If you grew up with inconsistent love, you may lean toward anxious or avoidant attachment styles. This creates a disconnect between desire and readiness. You might want connection deeply, but push it away subconsciously. God, in His wisdom, often uses seasons of waiting to bring healing to these patterns, gently correcting your internal compass so that when your soulmate arrives, your nervous system says yes, not out of desperation, but out of discernment. Waiting can feel like stagnation, but from a neurobiological and spiritual view, it is often a period of profound transformation. You are not waiting for a person. You are becoming the person who can meet them fully. This becoming involves changes in hormone regulation, particularly oxytocin and dopamine, the chemicals responsible for bonding and reward. God introduces your soulmate when those systems are no longer addicted to the highs and lows of dysfunction, but are instead attuned to the steady rhythm of mutual respect, emotional safety, and shared values. In this sense, divine timing is not a calendar date, but a state of internal congruence. When your values, brain chemistry, and spiritual awareness align, you are positioned to both recognize and receive what God has prepared for you. This alignment doesn't guarantee ease, but it does ensure clarity. Suddenly, the noise of past relationships, the pull of loneliness, and the pressure of cultural expectations fade, and what emerges is a quiet confidence that allows you to see your soulmate not as a missing piece, but as a divine complement. The human brain, in its most integrated state, is wired to thrive in connection, not chaotic, codependent connection, but a bond that reflects the peace and purpose of God's design. God prepares you before He presents them, because the soul must be strengthened before it can sustain sacred connection. This preparation is not punishment, nor is it passive waiting. It is divine conditioning, a reshaping of who you are so that you are equipped to walk in love with clarity, responsibility, and endurance. Often, in the pursuit of love, people focus on finding the right person, but overlook the essential truth that you must also become the right person. The transformation that happens in private, through prayer, healing, solitude, and inner work, is the foundation that supports lasting intimacy. In neuroscience, we understand that behaviors are downstream from identity, and identity is shaped by belief, habit, and neurochemical experience. When God is preparing you, He is not just altering circumstances. He is recalibrating your internal environment so that you are neurologically and spiritually aligned with the kind of love He intends to give you. Preparation involves pruning. Sometimes you are stripped of relationships, desires, or patterns that are not sustainable for the future God has for you. This may feel like rejection, but it is really refinement. The frontal cortex, responsible for executive function and long-term planning, becomes sharper during seasons of challenge and reflection. You begin to think differently. You no longer view love as an escape, but as a partnership. You stop chasing intensity and start seeking integrity. This shift is not just emotional, it's neurological. Your reward pathways begin to rewire, shifting from short-term pleasure, seeking to long-term peace building. God uses this shift to make sure that when your soulmate arrives, you're not ruled by impulse, but led by wisdom. Preparation often involves solitude, but not loneliness. In solitude, your brain enters a state of neurogenesis, the creation of new neural pathways through reflection, prayer, and meaningful routines. You become more emotionally resilient, more self-aware. Solitude becomes a training ground for emotional regulation, which is essential for any healthy relationship. If you cannot sit with yourself in silence, it becomes difficult to sit with someone else in vulnerability. God knows this. He leads you into stillness so that you can hear your own heart without interference. He leads you into quiet so that your spirit becomes sensitive to his voice and direction. In this stillness, the noise of the world fades, and you begin to identify what truly matters. This is how you learn to distinguish between a distraction and a destiny connection. God also prepares your heart by healing your wounds. Many people carry unresolved pain into relationships, expecting their soulmate to fix what only God can touch. But preparation means confronting those wounds and inviting God to heal them, layer by layer. When trauma is left unaddressed, the brain operates in survival mode, constantly scanning for threats, misinterpreting signals, and reacting from fear rather than responding with love. But as healing happens, the amygdala, the part of the brain responsible for fear and threat detection, begins to quiet down. The prefrontal cortex strengthens, allowing you to make thoughtful, grounded decisions. You become less reactive, more responsive. Love becomes something you offer, not something you chase to soothe your pain. God may also challenge your habits during this preparation. He begins to discipline your time, your focus, and your attention. You may be drawn away from environments or people that once seemed harmless but no longer align with where you're going. He introduces structure into your life. Structure isn't restriction, it's preparation. Just like a runner trains before a marathon, God disciplines your spirit, mind, and body to carry the weight of deep connection. He trains you to communicate clearly, to manage stress, to serve without resentment, to give without expectation. These are not just skills. They are spiritual muscles being built so that when love arrives, you're strong enough to hold it. Another part of God's preparation is identity revelation. You begin to see yourself not through the lens of past rejection or brokenness, but through the truth of who you are in Him. This changes your posture. It alters how you show up in the world. You no longer seek validation from romantic attention because you've been affirmed by the Creator. This confidence is not arrogance. It is rooted in security, and security is one of the most attractive and stabilizing forces in any relationship. When you know who you are, you attract what aligns, not what manipulates or competes. God is preparing you to walk in that kind of stability, to love not from emptiness, but from overflow. Sometimes God delays the introduction of your soulmate because He is developing your discernment. Not everyone who looks like love is sent by Him. Discernment is a product of spiritual sensitivity, but also cognitive clarity. You begin to notice red flags quicker, not because you're cynical, but because your spirit has been sharpened. Your standards rise, not in superficial ways, but in substance. You begin to value character over charm, consistency over chemistry, mission over momentary excitement. God allows experiences along the way to teach you what is real and what is counterfeit, so that when He presents the one meant for you, your heart will not waver. It will recognize, respond, and rest. Your nervous system recognizes what your spirit has prayed for, even before your mind fully understands it. The intricate connection between the body, soul, and spirit means that there are signals and impressions happening beneath the surface, guiding you toward what is aligned with your purpose and destiny. When you've spent time in prayer, when your desires have been shaped not just by emotion but by communion with God, your inner world begins to reflect that alignment. And this alignment doesn't just stay in the realm of the spiritual, it translates into physiological responses. The nervous system, particularly the autonomic nervous system, begins to respond differently when you encounter someone who carries the frequency of answered prayer. You may feel a sense of calm, safety, or unexplainable peace in their presence. That's not just chemistry. It's spiritual recognition made manifest through the body. The vagus nerve, which plays a major role in regulating your heart rate, digestion, and emotional state, becomes especially important here. When we feel emotionally safe or spiritually connected with someone, our vagus nerve is activated in a way that promotes rest, openness, and intimacy. This is why you might feel a sense of rest or groundedness when you meet someone who is truly right for you. Your body is telling you that this is not a threat. It's not adrenaline-fueled attraction rooted in anxiety or insecurity. It's a somatic yes. This kind of nervous system recognition is often subtle but powerful. It feels like home, even if you can't articulate why. On the flip side, your nervous system is also trained by your past. If you have a history of chaos, betrayal, or dysfunction, your body can become used to patterns that are unhealthy. You might be drawn to intensity or emotional highs and lows because your nervous system has equated instability with love. This is why healing is so critical before divine connection can fully manifest. As your spirit prays and as God leads you through healing, your nervous system begins to recalibrate. The patterns of the past are disrupted, and your body starts to respond to peace as the new normal. You begin to lose interest in situations that previously excited you, and you start to notice a deeper draw toward calm, stable, emotionally safe individuals. This is not a lack of passion. It's the emergence of divine alignment. When your spirit prays for a partner who is kind, patient, purpose-driven, and emotionally mature, it is essentially sending instructions to your mind and body. Over time, your nervous system adapts. You stop interpreting tension as passion. You stop mistaking inconsistency for mystery. You begin to crave what you've prayed for. Your internal compass is refined by your spiritual requests, and those requests are recorded not just in the heavens, but in your own biology. The amygdala, which governs emotional memory, stores these spiritual preferences in the form of reactions and impressions. When you meet someone who fits that spiritual blueprint, you may experience what some call divine familiarity. It's not just déjà vu. It's recognition on a soul and cellular level. This connection is often marked by coherence. Heart rate variability increases, cortisol levels remain balanced, and the nervous system is neither in flight nor shut down. You're present. You're not overthinking or performing. You're simply at ease. That ease is one of the strongest indicators of divine alignment. Your spirit has been communing with God about what it needs, and your body knows when that prayer is being answered. You feel it before you analyze it. You trust it before you explain it. This is not something that can be forced or faked. It's the result of alignment between heaven's plan and your inner world. Moreover, the nervous system doesn't operate in isolation. It mirrors and responds to the energy of others. When you are in the presence of someone who is also walking in alignment with God, your systems begin to sync. This is known as physiological synchrony. Heartbeats, breathing patterns, and even brainwave activity can begin to mirror one another in close emotional bonds. This mirroring creates connection, not just emotionally, but physically and spiritually. It's why some people feel like you've known them forever. The nervous system responds as though it has found safe harbor, because in a way it has. Spiritual preparedness through prayer programs your heart to recognize truth. This truth may not come with fireworks or grand gestures, but it will carry the weight of peace. The nervous system, when healed and attuned, responds more strongly to stability than to drama. And stability in the presence of the right person feels like God whispering yes without saying a word. It's in the silence of shared presence, in the way your body softens instead of tensing, in the way your breath deepens instead of shortening. These are signs that what your spirit has cried out for in secret is now standing in front of you in plain sight. Over time, the nervous system becomes your ally, helping you distinguish between soul ties and divine connections. The more your spirit is rooted in truth, the more your body becomes a vessel of discernment. You begin to feel what is good for you before your mind tries to make sense of it. This somatic discernment, refined through prayer, fasting, journaling, worship, and stillness, creates a bridge between heaven's plan and your physical experience. Isolation is often the setup for revelation because it creates the space where all distractions are stripped away and clarity is forced to emerge. In isolation, God is not just removing noise from your environment. He is recalibrating your identity, refining your desires, and revealing truths that would otherwise remain hidden in the comfort of crowds or the chaos of constant movement. From a neurological perspective, isolation gives your brain a chance to rest, process, and reorganize. When you're no longer absorbing the expectations of others or reacting to the energy of relationships that do not serve your growth, your nervous system begins to shift from survival mode into a state of reflection and healing. This is often uncomfortable because your mind has been conditioned to find safety in busyness, yet it's in that discomfort that the most profound transformation occurs. The default mode network DMN of the brain, which becomes active during rest and introspection, plays a significant role in the revelations that occur during isolation. The DMN is where self-awareness is cultivated, where you begin to ask deeper questions about your purpose, your patterns, and your pain. In the silence of isolation, the DMN allows you to revisit memories, reinterpret them, and gain new insight into why certain things happened and what they were meant to teach you. God uses this mental stillness to speak truths that get drowned out in noise. He brings up buried pain not to torment you, but to free you. He surfaces old fears not to scare you, but to heal you. You begin to recognize the ways you've settled, the ways you've abandoned, and the ways you've misidentified yourself based on who walked away or what didn't work out. During this season, your relationship with yourself deepens. You begin to notice your triggers, your emotional patterns, and the ways you've coped that are no longer necessary. The limbic system, which governs emotional processing, starts to regulate differently as you engage in reflection, journaling, prayer, and solitude. Emotional responses that once felt overwhelming become more manageable. You gain new tools for understanding your own heart. This self-knowledge becomes the groundwork for intimacy, because you cannot truly connect with another until you've first become acquainted with yourself. God knows that isolation builds the internal infrastructure needed to hold the weight of a sacred relationship. Without it, the connection might collapse under the pressure of unhealed wounds and unspoken fears. God often uses isolation to detox you from attachments that were never divine in the first place. These could be romantic, emotional, social, or even ideological. When you're alone, you're forced to confront what you truly believe about love, about yourself, and about God's role in both. You realize how much of your identity may have been built on someone else's validation or the presence of constant companionship. This realization is painful, but it's also liberating, because in that moment, you are invited to rebuild on truth rather than codependency. You are invited to construct a self-image rooted not in being chosen by another, but in being created and known by God. That shift from external validation to divine affirmation is what prepares you to meet your soulmate without making them your savior. The rewiring that happens during isolation is both spiritual and neurological. Your habits change, your priorities change, you start to develop rhythms that support your growth. Morning stillness, focused prayer, physical movement, creative expression. The brain begins to associate peace with these routines. Your stress hormones, like cortisol, begin to regulate. Your dopamine system starts to seek reward from depth rather than distraction. You begin to find joy in becoming whole, not just in being wanted. That joy becomes a magnet. It draws the right people to you, not because you're seeking them, but because you're becoming the kind of person who attracts alignment. In this process, revelation begins to pour in. You start to see yourself through the lens of grace. You realize that what you thought were delays were actually acts of mercy. God was not withholding love. He was protecting you from premature connection that would have derailed your growth. You become more sensitive to His voice and more attuned to what peace feels like in your body. The silence that once felt suffocating starts to feel sacred. The space that once felt empty now becomes holy ground. And it's in this sacred stillness that God begins to speak with clarity. You may receive visions, ideas, names, or impressions that feel too specific to ignore. You may begin dreaming differently, sensing differently, discerning differently. These revelations are not products of imagination. They are signals, patterns, and insights shaped by your surrendered state. When your heart is still and your mind is open, revelation becomes more than a spiritual ideal. It becomes an embodied experience. You feel it in your chest, in your breath, in the peace that surpasses understanding. The connection between spirit and body sharpens, and you become a vessel ready to recognize what God reveals. Spiritual discernment is sharpened by emotional healing because the ability to truly recognize what is from God requires clarity in both spirit and soul. When emotions are tangled in past trauma, unhealed wounds, or unresolved grief, they tend to cloud spiritual perception. What feels like discernment can actually be fear, anxiety, or projection. Emotional pain filters how you interpret people and situations. Until healing occurs, your spiritual radar remains distorted. Discernment is not simply intuition. It is a combination of spiritual sensitivity and psychological clarity. God may be speaking, but if your soul is still bleeding, you may misinterpret a warning as peace or a counterfeit as a promise. Emotional healing creates the stillness and stability needed to truly hear and discern what God is saying. The brain plays a significant role in this process. The amygdala, responsible for detecting emotional threats, is often hyperactive in people who have experienced betrayal, abandonment, or emotional volatility. It's constantly scanning for danger, which can lead to overreactions or mistrust even in safe spaces. This hypervigilance blurs spiritual discernment because the body reacts before the spirit can respond. Emotional healing helps regulate the amygdala, lowering the stress response so that your heart and mind can work in harmony. When your emotions are not hijacking your reactions, you're better positioned to recognize God's peace as distinct from your own wishful thinking or fear-based decisions. Discernment also becomes sharper when your heart is no longer seeking rescue. Many people mistake attention for affection and chemistry for calling simply because their hearts are still aching. Emotional wounds crave quick relief, and in the search for healing, people may prematurely attach to what looks like love, but is only comfort dressed in spiritual language. Healing interrupts this cycle. It teaches you to pause, to sit with your emotions rather than run from them. It allows space for God to minister to the root instead of just soothing the symptom. As the heart heals, it becomes less reactive and more receptive. You no longer chase what soothes your ego. You wait for what anchors your soul. God often allows emotional healing to unfold in layers, gradually revealing what needs to be addressed for discernment to increase. Each layer removed reveals a clearer perspective. You begin to see patterns in past relationships that you once missed. You notice how certain traits, once attractive, were actually red flags. You realize that what you used to call love was sometimes attachment, obligation, or survival. This awareness isn't just intellectual, it's spiritual. As you heal, the Holy Spirit has more room to lead. Your own voice quiets and his becomes more pronounced. What once confused you now becomes obvious. The cloudiness lifts, the fog dissipates. You start to feel conviction where you used to feel confusion. That's discernment rising from the soil of healing. One of the most overlooked aspects of emotional healing is its effect on your inner dialogue. Many people have internal narratives formed by past experiences, scripts that tell them they're unworthy, too much, not enough, or destined to be alone. These internal messages shape how they interpret relationships and divine opportunities. Healing rewrites these scripts. It introduces truth where lies once lived. It replaces shame with worthiness, confusion with wisdom, scarcity with expectation. When your inner world aligns with God's truth, discernment flows more naturally. You no longer second guess peace, nor do you tolerate what violates your spirit. You begin to trust your no as much as your yes. You become comfortable walking away from what is almost right because you are now calibrated to wait for what is fully aligned. Another key shift that happens during emotional healing is the development of boundaries. Boundaries are not barriers to connection, they are filters for discernment. When your emotional health improves, you stop trying to rescue or fix others as a form of earning love. You stop spiritualizing dysfunction in the name of grace. Instead, you discern the difference between someone who is willing to grow and someone who only consumes your energy. Boundaries give you the emotional margin to discern without entanglement. You can hear God more clearly when you're not emotionally exhausted or relationally entangled with people who drain your peace. As your nervous system settles and your emotional patterns mature, your spiritual perception heightens. You start sensing when something is off before it escalates. You begin to feel dissonance not because you're afraid, but because your spirit recognizes a lack of alignment. You lean into prayer with expectancy rather than panic. You trust that God's voice is not hidden, it's just often drowned out by inner turmoil. Healing quiets that turmoil. It opens your ears. It sharpens your instincts. It makes room for discernment to rise not from panic, but from peace. You become less easily manipulated by charm, less impressed by surface-level connection, more focused on the fruit and the flow. You begin to assess not by emotion alone, but by alignment, energy, intention, and evidence. You see beyond words. You feel beyond presence. You know beyond explanation. Purpose and partnership are interwoven in divine connections because God does not create relationships solely for companionship, but for assignment, alignment, and expansion of purpose. When you meet the person God has destined for you, the relationship doesn't just feel good emotionally. It activates something spiritually. There is a resonance that confirms this connection is not random. It's been orchestrated to advance the calling on both your lives. The union carries vision, not just emotion. It builds, multiplies, refines, and strengthens. From a biblical and neurological lens, relationships that thrive and endure are built not only on attraction, but on shared mission and intentionality. When purpose is the foundation, the relationship can weather storms, redirect setbacks, and generate lasting fruit. In the brain, purpose is connected to the dopamine reward system. When two people are moving toward a common goal, working in alignment, and sharing meaning in their efforts, the dopamine circuits are engaged in a way that promotes motivation, joy, and resilience. This is not just emotional chemistry. It's neurochemical synergy. It's a shared high, not from superficial romance, but from contributing to something that matters together. People who are joined by God often experience this kind of drive and flow. They energize one another, push each other closer to their callings, and create space for their individual and collective gifts to grow. Their union becomes a sacred ecosystem where healing, creativity, and leadership thrive. Purpose-filled partnerships also engage the prefrontal cortex, responsible for planning, decision making, and long-term thinking. When God brings two people together, they begin to dream with structure, not just fantasy. They talk about vision, not just feelings. They plan their future with clarity, not just based on romantic ideals. This kind of connection grounds the relationship. It gives direction. Instead of floating in ambiguity, they begin to define what they are building, who they are serving, and how they are going to steward their influence. This clarity is often a sign of divine orchestration, because confusion is not the language of heaven. Where God is present, there is order, peace, and progression. Partnerships with divine purpose also tend to expose anything that distracts or delays that purpose. When the right person enters your life, their presence will highlight areas of stagnation, procrastination, or misalignment in you, not to condemn, but to call you higher. They'll challenge your comfort zone. They'll ask about your vision. They'll encourage your healing. They'll push you toward excellence. Their love won't be passive. It will be purposeful. That kind of love rewires your perspective. You start wanting to be better not out of fear of loss, but out of reverence for the responsibility of being connected to someone sent by God. Purpose-driven relationships create a deep sense of safety, not because they are free from conflict, but because they are rooted in something eternal. Emotional security grows when there is a mutual understanding that the relationship is about more than pleasure, it's about promise. This allows both people to speak truth with love, to navigate challenges with grace, and to move through transition with unity. They know they are not just holding each other's hands, they are holding each other's assignments. This sacred trust forms a spiritual bond that transcends superficial compatibility. It creates an environment where faith, prayer, accountability, and service become daily rhythms, not occasional acts. God-designed partnerships also create ripple effects in the lives of others. These unions are often magnetic, not because of physical appearance, but because of the spiritual atmosphere they carry. People feel inspired, challenged, and awakened simply by being around them. Their love doesn't isolate, it expands. Their union doesn't just meet personal needs. It fills gaps in communities, churches, and movements. That's how you know the relationship carries divine weight. It doesn't just serve the couple, it serves the kingdom. It brings clarity, not confusion. It brings growth, not regression. It brings multiplication, not stagnation. Their impact multiplies because the love is anchored in purpose. God often prepares both individuals separately before bringing them together so that their connection is a meeting of wholeness, not brokenness. This doesn't mean perfection. It means readiness. It means that each person has allowed God to cultivate their gifts, refine their character, and establish their identity in Him before trying to merge lives. When they come together, there is less entanglement and more embodiment of calling. They recognize that their relationship is not an escape from responsibility, but an invitation into greater stewardship. They become partners in faith, not just lovers in feeling. They pray together, build together, stretch together, and elevate each other in every dimension of life. When purpose is the backbone of partnership, love becomes deeper than words and moments. It becomes movement. It becomes a living testimony of what happens when two people surrender to God's timing, trust His process, and align with His vision. Their union carries a prophetic weight, revealing to others what divine timing, healing, and alignment truly look like in action. Their intimacy becomes ministry. Their home becomes sanctuary. Their relationship becomes legacy. Purpose doesn't replace love. It amplifies it. It gives love a destination. It gives romance a reason. It turns connection into covenant and presence into partnership.